I'm Helen.
And I'm Liz.
And we're sisters,
Scientists.
and lifelong X-Files fans.
And this is We Want to Believe. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to a unorthodox episode of We Want to Believe. It's just Liz right now. This is not what was intended. Let me tell you a little story. Last week, Helen and I got together to record. Got about halfway in, no, more than halfway. We were like 30 solid minutes into recording our episode when we realized we were not recording, and we were exasperated. So we hit record and we recorded a solid hour then, going back over stuff. Really, we felt on fire. It was an excellent episode. Lots of good anecdotes, lots of entertaining stuff. But then it turns out we weren't recording then either. And we didn't find out until right before this episode was supposed to be uploaded. So instead, you are getting this very short, very quick update just from me. So first off, the episode that we were discussing in this podcast episode is Shapes. Did I watch it? No, but I will tell you about it anyway. It doesn't sound like it was very good at all. Very offensive as far as making Native Americans as sort of like othering, like, ooh, mystical. It's basically about a werewolf type situation out west. Guy, I don't know. I didn't watch it. I did see it a long time ago. You know, not a very good X-File. We got a lot into it though, and we talked about a lot of good stuff, but you know, that is lost to history. Well, Shapes though, not recommended by Helen, not recommended by me, even though I didn't watch it more recently because I trust Helen. So then what I said, which is relevant, and you'll understand why in a moment, is that I bet I could make up a better episode of the X-Files called Shapes real quickly. And so I said, I'm going to come up with a plot for an X-Files episode. It's called Shapes. Not actually write the whole thing down, but come up with a sketch. And Helen said, you mean like fan fiction? I said, yeah, I guess, but not, fully written down. Just kind of come up with a sketch for it. We've already recorded the episode that comes after this and airs a week later. I did come up with an alternate version of an X-Files episode called Shapes. You need that context though, or you're going to be like, what is happening? Why is Liz doing this? It's because of the actual episode Shapes, which did not impress us, and we talked about it. As I said, lost forever, but that's what we were doing. So Shapes itself, no, not worth your time. We did tell some other stories and have some other updates. One update is that we are going to be reading X-Files Origins Agent of Chaos. Just a reminder on that, if you'd like to read along with us. This is the 2017 young adult novel about Mulder as a 17-year-old in 1979, solving crimes with his teenage friends. No idea what's going to happen there, I don't mean the plot, although I guess I don't know the plot either, but I mean, will it be awesome? Will it be painful? Will it be somewhere in between? We'll find out together and we'll talk about it. Another update that I wanted to mention is we are going to do a collaboration coming up soon with our friends podcast. It's called Violent Vice, and they talk about spooky historic crimes and also spooky legends. And it is run by a brother and sister team. So another sibling spooky podcast, Audie and JJ. And so we're going to be guests on their podcast. They're going to be guests on ours, but I recommend check out Violent Vice and listen for them on an upcoming episode of We Want to Believe. Then at the end of that episode that was not recorded, we talked about a really, I think, the most scary listener story I have heard yet. So scary. So I'm going to tell it to you right now. Why not? It's weird talking to myself, by the way. I guess I'm not technically talking to myself. My dog is here. He's whining faintly. He's dissatisfied with something. You might hear him. I'll hope it stays at whining and doesn't turn into barking. Okay, so I'll tell you this story, though, because it was really great the first time because Helen hadn't heard it and she was all into it. And like, it's scared, and it was grand. Also, I don't remember it quite as well this week. I'm getting quality content here, but we don't want to miss a week. We miss so many weeks. So here we are. Anyway, this comes from Erin, and you can picture her played by Lori Petty, as she was in the 90s. Erin was 18, and she had just moved out to the East Coast in, I want to say, Connecticut. She was newly married, and her husband had a job out there at a military base. And so a friend of her husband's told her that the two of them ought to go to this beach called Pleasure Beach. It's a really cool place. So they drove out there one night, and they weren't really sure where they were going. This was back before they had smartphones and easy ways to get around and, find maps, but somehow they found their way there sort of just by luck. And it wasn't like a sandy swimming type beach. It was very, very rocky, lots of big rocks. And Erin climbed up onto this big outcropping of rock where she could kind of see a far distance, like out in the water, and then also out kind of behind them in this field. And in the field, at the kind of the edge of the field, she saw this little black shape. I immediately thought of the demon bunny, which I talked about in our first bonus episode, something I saw that was scary. So she saw this little black shape kind of go into the field. And so she came down on the rocks, and she was telling her husband, I just saw something weird. And they were kind of joking around like, oh, there's monsters. And then they look out into the field, and they see what looks like a human figure, but completely solid black. She described it as like a shadow monster, like it was made of shadows and huge and human shaped. So they took off running, got back into their car, drove home. And she said the whole drive home, it was terrifying that they had this sense that it was following them, that they didn't, see it, but they just really had the creeps. And, oh, that's funny that I say the creeps. Actually, that was one of the things I remember Helen telling me about this episode, is there was a weird little interaction between Mulder and Scully and one of the local people saying, oh, it gives you the creeps. You ever get the creeps, Agent Scully? The creeps. Anyway, they had the creeps, Erin and her husband. They're driving. They get home, and Erin starts sitting at the computer, writing up the experience to put on her live journal, because it is 2003, and that's what you do. And at the same time, her husband is just kind of fidgeting anxiously, and he's got a pocket knife that he's kind of flipping around, or at least I don't remember if it was a pocket knife, a knife. And he's kind of fiddling with that. And then Erin says it starts freaking her out, and she starts having this sense that the shadow monster was almost like inside him and was posing a threat to Erin. And so she said to her husband, like, you got to stop doing that. I have this really creepy feeling like he's inside you. Like all of a sudden you're going to open your mouth and this thing's going to come out of you with all these teeth. And then her husband looks at her, and they both simultaneously say, and claws, and they both do the same sort of forward clawing motion. And he said, I've been sitting here thinking the same thing about you. And that's really creepy to me. Ooh. And then a couple days later, her husband was at work, and Pleasure Beach got brought up, and one of his coworkers was like, I went out there once and I saw this. And he described the shadow monster. He's like, did you see anything when you were out there? So that's creepy. And then I looked up Pleasure Beach, and Helen and I found that it was also like an abandoned amusement park area, which is just some nightmare fuel. So it gets even creepier, picturing it there. So yeah, that's pretty scary. Then, recapping again from the episode that wasn't, Helen told an excellent story about Zach, her husband, and our sound person. What is he? Engineer? I don't remember what he's called. Zach something. Anyway, when Zach was younger, him and his ex-girlfriend were camping. They were out west, and they went down by this river, and it was beautiful. It was daytime, but they stayed too long. The sun set, and it was starting to set. So they're like, we got to leave. And they didn't have a phone with them. And this was before smartphones anyhow, but still no phone, no flashlights. And they're in the woods after they're leaving this river, trying to get back to their car, and they realize they're not totally sure where they are. And they're out in the mountains, and they start hearing rustling of a big animal with like crunching leaves and footsteps nearby. And they can't see what it is. There's very little light. So they're completely freaked out. And obviously they think it's a bear because it's big and it's walking and it's following them. So they start hustling and they don't know what to do. And finally they come up onto the path. And so then the big animal steps out, and it was a cow. Not nature's scariest animal. Kind of nice. I then also brought up the time that I saw a bunch of cows that had gotten loose from somewhere, and we pulled over to like make sure the cows were okay. And one of them jumped straight in the air. It had a vertical leap that was very impressive. Could it dunk a basketball? No, but that's probably more on account of the hooves. Yeah, cows can jump straight up. It was terrifying. I went back in the car and I locked the doors. So I think that is about what we covered. This was just a very not entertaining version of it because I had to go fast. I didn't have to, but I don't feel like talking for an hour about stuff. Anyway, sorry. That's about all I got. We still don't have a great sign off. So if you can come up with something, please let us know. Also, share your spooky stories with us. Remember, you can email us at wewanttobelievepod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at wewanttobelievepod. Subscribe, like, review us, do all that good stuff. It means a lot. We appreciate it. See you next week. Now I get to try to figure out how to hit stop.